here from the Miners Gala, and let's hope you get down there and wipe the floor with some of them imposters that were down there. I'm absolutely sick to death of people who will not touch us with a barge pole, but when we have the gala on, people want to come. I'm sick of phone calls, I'm sick of people asking us what to do. We nominate two men, they must think we crackers. Them two men's on the platform here, one on the balcony, one here. We nominate them because we want change, we want socialism. These are the fellow who's going to deliver it. And as long as I'm general secretary of this union, there'll never be any right-wingers up here for the Labour Party. We went too far with the warmonger up in Sedgefield, who nearly had us in the Third World War, and probably should be known now as the creator of IS. So neither of them people are welcome, that they never pick the phone up again, that they're in darkness for our president. It's up to them. If he's the leader or a woman's the leader of the Labour Party, they'll get an invite. But by Christ, if they didn't say what they're going to say, or what we want them to say, there'll be some sparks flying. Right? Okay, now, we're on a very, very tight schedule today because of the cathedral. We've got 5 major speakers and some international speakers who I'm hoping is going to try and keep the contributions down, and I'll shut up as much as I can also. The first speaker, it's a great, great pleasure for me to introduce this chap. Not only a great personal friend of mine, he's a great trade unionist, great supporter of the International Brigade, great supporter of the Freedom Riders in Sheffield, a man who's just recently been elected as the president of a union, ASLEF, who helped us tremendously during the strike. If we'd had the support of the rest of the movement like ASLEF supported us, we would have gotten a different result in that strike. Tosh McDonald, the new president, it's a pleasure to introduce you, and I'm sure he'll entertain you. Tosh, it's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Davey. Comrades, to be following Jeremy Corbyn at a time like this is a tremendous honour. It's a tremendous honour for me personally and for ASLEF to be stood on this platform, where when you stand on this platform and you look back over 131 years, you truly are stood on the shoulders of giants. And Jeremy Corbyn is one of those giants for the future. And we also encourage all of you, if you're in the Labour Party, vote for Jeremy Corbyn. If you're an affiliated member through your trade union, make sure you sign that paper and vote for Jeremy Corbyn. And if you're a supporter, pay your £3 and vote for Jeremy Corbyn. And for Tom Watson for the deputy leader. Now, personally for me, it's good to be stood here in Durham. It means a lot to me. I was brought up by my grandparents and they came from Durham. My grandfather worked in the Durham coalfield before moving to Yorkshire, to the Yorkshire coalfield. He said it was for work. My grandmother says it was because he was a bit of a rogue and he maybe owes people money. Well, I have checked, and anything he owed any of your family, it don't go down as far as the grandson. I've made sure of that. My grandmother said he won a fortune on his own dogs, but he lost it on somebody else's horses and he had to clear off. But anyway, I started work on the railway in 1979 as a freight guard in Doncaster. And all the work that we did then, every day at work we were moving coal from a pit to a power station, bringing the empty carriages back to the pit to be loaded again. And we owned it. We owned it all. We owned the pits. And the members of the National Union of Mine Workers went down to the bowels of the earth and they brought the coal up and they loaded it onto the trains that we owned in British Rail. And members of ASLEF and what has now become the RMT transported it to the power stations that we owned. And then they generated it into electricity and they distributed it because we owned the power to distribute it too. And we distributed it to where it was needed, not where the most profit was. It went to homes, it went to factories, it went to hospitals and schools, not for profit. But we did have some left over, and we used to export coal, you know. There'll be generations here who don't remember Britain as a nation that exported British coal all over, and I worked trades to the deep sea port at Immingham to be exported around the world. Now any coal at Immingham is coming in, and that is terrible. We had a proper northern powerhouse that we all owned at that time. Yay! So I say to Gideon Osborne, and there were nobody in council estate I grew up at called Gideon, I can tell you that. I say to Gideon Osborne, that's the northern powerhouse that we had, that your predecessors took off us, and that's the northern powerhouse we want back, but we want it for the whole of society, not just here in the north. Well, in 1979 when I started work on the railway, something else happened. There was a woman got elected as Prime Minister that year, Margaret Thatcher. And there she is. It's a wonderful sight to look over there. I see Margaret Thatcher in a coffin, and I see my beautiful wife next to her. Next to the video. That's fantastic. But when Thatcher came to power, she dismantled that northern powerhouse and the rest of the powerhouse. And you know, I hated her. And I've said this a lot of places where I go, so many you'll have heard it before. So this will probably be the last time I say it, and I can't think of a better place to say it. I hated Margaret Thatcher with every bone in my body, and every breath I took. Every piece of passion I could summon up was spent hating Margaret Thatcher. But when she was alive, I used to set the alarm clock an hour earlier than I needed every day, just so I could hate her for an hour longer every day. Unfortunately, comrades, that extra hour a day I got didn't last very long, because I now hate Cameron, and I hate Osborne, and I hate all those Liberals who kept them in power for 5 years. So, I'm lacking sleep again. But I do remember 1984-85, and I'm proud of the support that all the rail unions give to the mine workers, and we're all still proud this day that not a shovel full of coal moved by rail in that 12-month strike. Not a shovel full. And I know we had depots, one near me in Nottingham, where all they had to do was coal. And this was at a time when we had a very low salary, and train drivers made their wages up in shift allowance, in bonuses and in overtime. And for a year, because they refused to move coal and were being sent home every day, we had families of train drivers in places like Nottingham and others up and down the country living on benefits for supporting the fellow workers. And we're proud to have done that, and we would do it again tomorrow, should we be asked. Now what we see, in April, we saw Cameron and Osborne and the Liberal Democrats introduce a tax, an extra tax on coal. They doubled the tax on coal. What we saw in the meantime was power stations that we don't own anymore, stockpiling coal prior to that tax coming on. And they boast, the privatised power providers boast, that they have more coal stockpiled now than they had before the miners' strike. And they say they're not going to pay that extra tax. They're converting some power stations permanently to gas. So this spells the death knell probably for the last 3 Brits in Britain. And we have our members, train drivers who used to drive coal trains, sat around with nothing to do. We've got freight trains, coal trains stood in sidings with no coal in there. And they tell me it's an ecological tax. An ecological tax. Well, I'll tell you, there is nothing ecological about leaving hundreds of years of a reliable supply of fuel down beneath our feet, especially when we have the clean coal and carbon capture technology there. It's an ideological attack, and there's nothing green and nothing ecological about what they're doing. Now what the power distributors and power companies are saying, the privatised ones, are not going to pay this tax, and they don't care if they see the lights go out. Well, a couple of weeks ago I had the honour of speaking at Orgreave at the 31st anniversary of that battle there. I was invited by the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign, and they need all the support we can give them. And then we were part of the justification for those the Tories sending in the state stormtroopers with the shields and the helmets and the batons was to stop people fighting for the communities and their industry, threatening the lights going out. Now, does anybody here believe that these people are now threatening to put the lights out in the name of capitalism, in the name of private profit, in the name of personal greed? Does anybody believe that Gideon Osborne and David Cameron are going to send the state stormtroopers into them to make sure the lights stay on? Well, I don't. And at the last budget, never mind this week's, the last one, they gave tax incentives to gas and oil companies to go and find new oil and new gas. That's a fossil fuel too. It's an attack on the industry that's been going on since the 70s. And do you know, when we talk about British gas and about the North Sea oil, we say it's wonderful for the country. It delivers nothing for the country. What it does, you know, they get the gas out and they sell it on the world market for as much as they can get to make as much profit as they can. And if demand for gas comes up in Britain, they go back to that same world market and buy the gas back. And if they buy it cheaper, they've made more profit. If they buy it more expensive, they come to us. We're sorry, there's nothing we can do. The price of gas has gone up. We've got to put your bills up. It's a merry-go-round of private profit and greed. We have Deutsche Bahn, who now own what was the remnants of the British rail freight industry. And they're telling us they have 250 workers surplus because there's no coal moving. They tell us they're going to close depots, one of them here at Tyne Yard, and we're saying no. And we're saying no redundancies, otherwise you're going to feel the strength of ASLEF against you. And do you know who owns them, who Deutsche Bahn is? It's the German State Railway. And we have Northern Rail. I'm sure many of you here have had the misfortune to travel on Northern Rail, on those cattle trucks that were built in the 80s to last 20 years. And on behalf of my members who have to drive you around on them, on behalf of the RMT members who have to look after you on there, we apologise for the crap you have to carry around. Well, you know, it's up for e-franchise again. Up for e-franchise, and there's three preferred bidders. There's the German State Railway, there's the French State Railway, and there's the Dutch State Railway. The British state can't even bid. It's not allowed to. And I don't blame the German, French or Dutch State Railway for doing it. They boast quite openly. The German State Railway tells us their interest in Britain's railways subsidises the German taxpayer. The Dutch State Railway tells us it subsidises the fares in Holland. That should be our state railway. It should be subsidising all that we do. And when John Major privatised the rail, he said he was going to do two things. It was going to introduce competition, which would drive down costs and fares. More than 20 years later, we have the dearest fares in Europe. And let's look at the competition it's created. If you live in Wales, you want to travel on a train, you have to travel around Wales on Arriva Trains Wales. You have no choice, there's no competition. And Arriva, by the way, is the German State Railway. If you want to travel out of Wales or into Wales to London back and forward, you have no choice but to travel on First Great Western, on First Route. Unless, of course, it was last Thursday when they were on strike, you didn't travel very far that day at all. If you want to travel from London further north than the Midlands, be it on the West Coast Main Line, the Midland Main Line or the East Coast Main Line, you have to travel on Stagecoach, owned by Brian Souter, the man who bankrolls the SNP. When you travel on the West Coast, they call it Virgin West Coast. The majority shareholder is Stagecoach and Brian Souter. On the Midland Main Line, at least they call it Stagecoach, and it is Stagecoach. And I don't think Jeremy Corbyn and the other candidates would have had much trouble travelling here on East Coast prior to February, when it was back in public hands because the privateers couldn't do it. but now they call it Virgin East Coast. And Virgin and Richard Branson with his fluffy image, some say he's lucky enough to look like me. I don't know about that. They actually own 10% of it. 90% of it is owned by Brian Souter and Stagecoach, but they go with the fluffier brand. And the profits that they make, don't forget, they help to go to finance the SNP in Scotland. Now in Scotland, if somebody wants to travel around on a train within Scotland, they have no choice. They have to travel with a Bellio on ScotRail. Now a Bellio is the Dutch state railway. And the worst thing about this is the government in Scotland, just days after the independence referendum, handed the whole of ScotRail to the Dutch state railway within days, despite the fact there was a commission coming up to tell them what kind of powers they would have. And we can't talk here without looking at what happened in Scotland in the general election. And Scotland turned its back on the Labour Party. But we have to acknowledge that the Labour Party had been turning its back on Scotland and on all the industrial heartlands of Great Britain where Labour has seen its traditional support. And it's no good just looking at what happened in the run-up to the election as to what happened there. Because you have to look right back to the forming of New Labour and the Blairs and the Mandelson of this world. When they were saying we have to win the middle ground, we have to win the soft Tories, we have to win the Liberals, we have to shift to the right. And people in the party at that time, influential people, were saying, what about our traditional support? What about our core values, our core people? And Blair and Mandelson would quite openly say, they've got nowhere else to go. Well now, comrades, they have somewhere else to go. They go to the SNP, they will go to UKIP. And when political division in a country becomes a divide on nationalism rather than class, history shows us that is a very dangerous place to go.
Yes.
Now I know things are running late, now I've given 20 minutes, I don't think I've taken all that up, but I'm going to sort of wind it down a little bit. But what I am going to say on the leader of the Labour Party, when ASLEF met to discuss who we were going to support as a union, we sat down and we had no hesitation whatsoever. We immediately, unanimously, at national level said we will support Tom Watson for the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Somebody who stood up to Murdoch, the news of the world. Somebody who stands up to business, doesn't get into bed with them like New Labour did. We had no hesitation in supporting him. And we looked at the candidates for leader at that time. And I don't know if Jeremy's gone, he wasn't one of them at this point. But we looked at the candidates that were there, and all we saw was more of the same. We couldn't choose the tallest of the seven dwarfs out of them. We saw no difference. And going for more of the same policies that have lost the Labour Party 5 million votes between 1997 and 2010. They lost 4 million under Blair and they lost another million votes under Gordon Brown. Actually, in the last election, we increased our vote for the first time. So we didn't nominate. We couldn't nominate a leader. And then we had inspiration. And Messiah came with the initials JC. And we reconvened. And immediately, unanimously, we voted to support Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the Labour Party. We want socialism. We want no to austerity. We want to fight for our class the same way as they have fought for their class for all my working life. Comrades, it's been an honour to be here, to speak to you. I hope to come back again with more time sometime. Comrades, thank you very much, and support Jeremy Corbyn and Tom Watson.
Did all right, didn't he? Good lad.
Well, that's the start. There's more to come. I was particularly impressed by Tosh's the wicked woman Thatcher. And I think the lads is going to put a match to that a little bit later on, so if you eat any big cheese, that's what it'll be. While we're on it, she died on my birthday, by the way. I've had quite a few birthdays, far too many, some people say, but on that particular day, without any hesitation whatsoever, that was one of the greatest days of my life and the best birthday I've ever had. Whilst on about Thatcher now, I think what happened at Orgreave and Tosh McDonald, absolutely disgraceful. And they've whitewashed the report. The police cannot be found accountable. They've got bad memories. I've never known any police have a memory. All he does is tell lies, and he gets away with it. During that strike, 10,000 miners were criminalised. Not one policeman was ever took the task, and we paid the price for that. But there's people who's paid a bigger price, and they're sitting, I think they hope they're sitting on this platform. It's the girls who were heading up the campaign for Hillsborough, the tragedy what happened at the football ground, Margaret Aspinall and Sue Roberts. All of that's getting played back to these people. It's crucifying them. What type of state do we live in when we can't get any justice whatsoever? And the people who lost loved ones, 96 people,